I wanted first to just kind of set the stage talking about some of the consumer behavioral findings and research around second screen applications. I have two experts who will come up to the stage to help me do that, so please join me in welcoming from PwC two members of the Entertainment Communications and Media Practice, Lori Driscoll and Joe Atkinson. Guys, come on up. So welcome, Lori. Joe, thanks for being here to kick off Imagine Park. So companies come to you with bewildered gazes in their eyes, looking for help. They're looking to help solve problems about marketplace entry and sort of the metrics that surround marketplace entry. And you guys help them. PwC advises a lot of companies in the cable space and the surrounding space about those issues. And I don't know if you heard my prelude, but I was talking about how second screen has really sort of arisen in the last 18, 24 months as a very serious business pursuit for a lot of different companies. What I think makes you guys such a great sort of kickoff tandem is that you've looked into almost the anthropology of second screen, how consumers are or aren't engaging, adopting, embracing, and using some of the devices and the applications that play into this world. And so let me just start by asking you to contemplate that figure, Lori, where we talk about whether it's 40% or higher, a lot of people are have a smartphone or a tablet fired up while they're watching television. So does that mean necessarily that there's a business model waiting in the wings, or what do you make of that stat, and how do you sort of parse the emergence of this market?
Well, Stuart, I think the good news is it's a great opportunity. The second screen is the one spot where you take really the consumer, and it's the shortest distance between a consumer and what they like or love. And so it marries together the control experience associated with what you're watching on your primary screen, and then enjoying it in a way that makes sense to you. So for example, I think we talked about this earlier, but one of the best examples out there right now is Game of Thrones. So HBO series, obviously the last couple weeks have been big on that particular series. You've got a 2.4 Nielsen rating with the 18 to 49-year-olds that watch Game of Thrones. Those are the exact people that are also downloading and following the series using an app that makes sense of the 100+ characters that you're trying to figure out who's on the screen and who's doing what to who on any given day in Westoria.
So that's a great example of engagement within a microcosm of the audience,
right.
I think, and I think that's what maybe sometimes, I don't know, Joe, do we get overly enthused about this? We see that 40% number. I got to tell you, I use a tablet when I watch TV. I rarely mix the two experiences. So what do you make of that?
Well, I'll tell you, Stuart, if you look at this from the perspective of the opportunity that Lori's describing, what we're seeing across the industry, both globally and the US, is huge growth potential in terms of the spend in entertainment media. And second screen and digital platforms are key to that. So we're looking out over the next 5 years at growth that will take the entertainment media spend above $2.1 trillion from a level today that's about 1.6. Even if you take that into the US market, you look at just under $500 billion, or $499 billion today, $500 billion. It's going up of entertainment media spends. It'll go to $630 billion by 2017. What that means is that to capture that opportunity, you've got to be on the screens where the consumers are. The consumers are on the main screen in their living room, but as Lori described it, they're very intimate with the second screen. And from our perspective and the perspective of the industry, that's just a ton of opportunity.
So, I mean, let's talk about the economics just a little bit, because that sounds like a big number, and we'd all, I think, like to participate in that, but it's difficult to attribute a subset of that purely to second screen experiences, right? I don't know how you parse out the financial upside there.
One stat I would share, and Lori can weigh in, is that when you look at digital advertising, for example, we expect upwards of 40% of the total digital advertising spend in 2017 of 40% of the advertising spend to be connected to digital by 2017. And digital is happening on the second screen. That's really where that engagement is taking place. So when you look at that growth perspective and you look at how you carve that out, our view is that for years the industry had been talking about the threat presented by second screen. Now it's really that transition from threat to opportunity, and how do we capture the consumer's mind, their heart, that intimacy, and their dollars when we have them at the second screen.
concern about the threat, why has that abated? And what was the threat? What was the specter that was presented?
I think the threat was the unknown, because as we watch these devices exploding, we watch the explosion of the tablet, we watch the explosion of smartphones that are closing that gap in terms of the handheld capability. I think all of us looked at business models that have developed from the time we were running cable in the streets and said, not really sure what that's going to mean. But when you look at this industry, and you look at an industry that brought pay television to over 100 million homes in the US, I think the message, hopefully, that you take away is we're going to figure out and have been figuring out second screen, just as we figured out how to explode digital channels and provide HD choices and provide on-demand and all the other things that have been innovations in this industry.
Lori, I know you have some slides to show, so I don't want to trample on that, but segueing from that, about 30% of the people at this conference, this trade show, are cable operators, right? So you talked about Game of Thrones, which is a great example of a really engaging companion app that uses that second screen real estate. And other networks, I mean, just go down the list, have developed their own unique apps. People download them, people use them, and people enjoy them. Are they simply sort of bypassing the cable operator infrastructure? What's the role that the cable company can play, if any, in this world?
Well, it's a companion role, and oftentimes you're taking a platform that allows, over time, is going to continue to evolve as well. So it's about delivering an experience that's very unique and personalized, and then matching it up to apps that allow us to search, deliver, and really use content the way that we want to use it in order to enrich our viewing experience. So where this plays out most, sporting events.
Okay.
So you look at it, I just downloaded it yesterday because I'm out of Philadelphia, but I'm headed back to Philadelphia this week to go to the US Open on Wednesday for the practice round. And when you look at that, I'm trying to figure out, not only who's on the leaderboard, who's going to be teeing off when, but it's pretty exciting to be able to, watch it on TV, figure out my schedule, while I'm there, and then also use the app in terms of there's gamification associated with sporting events, and there's a lot that can be done associated with that in order to monetize the revenue streams.
You guys spend a lot of time looking at numbers and stats and parsing out projections, I get that, but I want to ask you a question about the aesthetics of television as it relates to second screen. Do we risk sort of diluting the experience of being fully engaged with a large screen television experience when you're looking down back and forth at your tablet or your smart? What's your view? Your personal view on that?
I would share the view that I think it's about context, right? And we talk about it in the context of from mass media to my media. It's a story that Lori just told about how the US Open goes from an event with tens of thousands of people and millions of viewers to a personal event for her. So the more that we can take that, call it primary screen experience, and bring it down and connect individually to consumers, I think we make that primary product better. And I think we make the connection more about an emotional connection with that product and more a participation than we've been able to do with a single screen experience prior to that.
And for the distributors, I think one thing I would add, for all of us in the room, anything short of joining those two together, we're not meeting expectations of our customers.
I agree with that, and I think that's a good answer to that question that I posed earlier. Let's look at some data. Do you want to share some findings that you guys? This is PwC, so we have to have some numbers at some point on the screen.
You're always going to have numbers.
Always a number.
So do you want to open?
Yeah, I'll just open with a couple of things, which is we talked about this idea of the growth in the industry. You can see some of the data that we're sharing, which is actually sourced with us from the Second Screen Society. But when you look at the overall engagement from a numbers perspective, what you're really seeing is in every sense of the word, second screen engagement is exploding. And I'll call your attention, Lori talked about sports. You'll see that one in the middle for those of us that are following the NBA finals. It's a timely stat. But 1 to 3 million social impressions associated with NBA games each week, by far blowing away a lot of the other indicators. You look at some of the large-scale events. We've got Grammys and Academy Awards and Super Bowl. But aside from talking about just the number of impressions that have happened with those events, look closely at the increases that we've seen in the impressions associated with those events. We're seeing multiplier effects year over year of 3 to 4 times in terms of consumers engaging not only with the primary screen event, but in that second screen setting. And aside from how interesting that is, what it also represents is value, because we know from a number of studies that brand impressions and brand loyalty climb in a multiplier effect the more times you see the brand. It's the reason you see so much branding associated with events like this one, for example, but the US Open and others. That brand loyalty builds not because you saw one impression, it builds because you become familiar and connected to the brand over time. That's one of the great opportunities associated with the second screen.
And it accelerates. So I think we talked about this backstage, but it accelerates with the use of social as a part of your community. So, as an example, you've got 400 million unique visitors that are on Twitter every month. There's an engagement with 11 different brands per user. And if you think about, if anybody was at the opening session and really, think through the power of social when it comes to content that you're viewing on your primary screen, I mean, Game of Thrones is a great example of that as well.
Yeah, I mean, there have been, it's interesting when you talk about the arrangement or the alliances between national advertisers and networks that have apps, that have second screen apps. There's been some really cool stuff that's done by, I'm sort of trying to think back, ABC and Fox, where you'll see your traditional 30-second ad on the screen. There's a chance for sort of a deeper engagement with that brand on the tablet or the mobile phone. And I mean, somewhere there has to be some economic lifeblood to fuel the growth of this. Is that where it's going to come from?
Yeah, I think I'm just going to switch it forward.
Sure.
Because I think, this is just an evolution diagram. So when we look at second screen, it can be used for a variety of different mechanisms, whether you're, informing in terms of programming that's coming out, and in terms of all the way through enhancing the overall experience. So our view of it, the customer's at the center of it, and the customer impact goes up if you're able to enhance and engage and build loyalty associated with that second screen.
It's some semantic issues are interesting to me in this category. One is just this term second screen. It sets up this, okay, that's my main screen and this is my subservient little guy here on my lap. I mean, for some people though, is it the inverse? I mean, is this always a second screen, or are we seeing changes in the sort of fundamental consumption of television related?
I'd take one example, which is more about internet connectivity than consumption of traditional television. But 3 or 4 years ago, when somebody wanted to conduct an internet search, their primary device of choice was a laptop or a desktop. Today, their primary device of choice, their first call will go to their mobile phone. And the reason that device is emerging, we've all seen it, is the capability that's now embedded in our hands versus what was there even 3 or 4 years ago. So whether that will ever become the first screen and the kind of sequencing will change, I think remains to be seen. But the real key, I believe, is when you look at engagement, you have to go to where the consumer is. Whether that's in the device in their hand, whether it's the one in their living room, whether it's their laptop or their desktop, we have to be where the consumers are. And we have to be there in a way that drives that commitment, that engagement, and that loyalty. That's the innovation call for our industry.
You know, I asked that question because everybody has the 19-year-old nephew who doesn't own a television set, right? So I mean, I think it's a valid question. You guys are very agile consultants. You help businesses solve problems. What's a takeaway if I'm a television network, if I'm AMC, or if I'm any of the Fox over there? What piece of advice would you give me if I'm just beginning to explore what can be done in this emerging second screen world? Do you have any thoughts about how to play?
I think agile is a perfect word. So you look at the screen, we have 5.7 connected devices in any home. In higher income homes, that number is 2 to 3 times it. So when you look at delivering on the second screen promise, it's really about my screen. So, and there's multiple people in my home. So at any given point in time, it's the relevance of the content that's being delivered. And analytics is behind it. So when we look at, where's the power going to come from, we need to spend a lot of time not only mining through, tune-in activity and viewing behaviors on TV, but consumer behaviors in terms of when I shop at a grocery store, in terms of my loyalty cards, everything that's in my home. There's a lot of third-party data that can be appended and turned around in order to deliver more relevant content to the second screen experience.
So it's possible you and I are watching the same television program. We each have a companion device. You might be seeing slightly different content at some point than I see, based on this data-driven relevancy.
Yes, over time, and I think the difference will be where we go to get our second screen content may be different just based on our own preferences.
Likely true. So Joe, what's your advice to a television network?
I think it's the classic, which is fail fast and fail often. you have to get out there with consumers and you have to try different ways to make the connection that Lori's describing. And we've been, many of us have been caught in a reactionary cycle with consumers, waiting for consumers to articulate what they want and then trying to build what they've asked for. And by the time you get there, the consumers are 25 miles from the point that you've arrived. It's so important to keep innovating and often provide something that consumers may not even realize they want, because it enhances the experience, it deepens the emotion. And if you can make those kinds of innovations, we think those are going to be key to developing real loyalty over time and revenue.
Last question, variation of that question. I'm now a cable company. I'm a Charter, I'm a Cox, I'm a Cablevision. I have the same question. I need to be involved in this second screen. It's big business, it's phenomenal, you know, usage. What are you going to tell me? What do I do?
Yeah, quite frankly, it's product innovation and strategic alliances. I mean, it's almost as simple as that. It's understanding what the consumer's looking for white space to create value in places that don't exist today, and either building it, innovating it, and or partnering in order to deliver on that promise.
Joe, the role of the cable company from your standpoint?
I think the reality is the cable companies have an unbelievable asset in the consumer relationship. And so they have, for all of the challenges that we've all talked about in the industry over time, they have a connection to the consumer. They have a license to engage the consumer in that innovation. So my advice, engage the consumer, because they want to be part of the innovation cycle. They want to be part of the evolution of their products and their experience.
Our shared 15 minutes of fame has just expired. This is a great tee up for the subject. Please thank Lori and Joe with me. Thanks for being here. All right, see you guys again.